Hi everyone, here's the book once again. Some of the greatest works in world literature take it as their mission to complicate our assumptions and our ideas about romance. Books like The Sorrows of Young Werther by Goethe, books like Romeo and Juliet by Shakespeare or The Great Gatsby by Fitzgerald, all in their different ways are obviously love stories, and they talk about the wonders and the beauty of love. But at the same time, there are also books about obsession, about selfishness, about the dangers of indulging in one's egotism. And yet, very often, readers take them just as, they take them as pure, unapologetic love stories and misunderstand them. So many people committed suicide because they were inspired by Werther's action. People very often read Romeo and Juliet as, the perfect star-crossed lovers without realizing that, Romeo was equally in love with a different person at the beginning of the play. And Gatsby, so many people read it just as a love story between Gatsby and Daisy without realizing exactly what his flaws and his errors are in the book. With Ethan Frome, Edith Wharton created a similar type of story, the story of similar star-crossed lovers, but one that couldn't possibly be misunderstood and misinterpreted by its readers. The action in Ethan Frome is quite contained, and although there would be a lot to say about the novel's frame narrative and the way Wharton uses it masterfully to subvert the reader's expectations, most of the novel revolves around three central characters: Ethan, his wife Zina, and Matty, a relative of Zina, living with the couple in their home, and with whom sexy farmer Ethan strikes up a bond of affection. Zina, the antagonist in the novel, is one of the most dreadful criminal minds I've read in a long time. I believe her and St. John Rivers from Jane Eyre should go on a picnic together. But while I've remarked in my review of Jane Eyre that I believe St. John Rivers truly is one of the most evil characters in all of literature, Zina's nastiness and wickedness is of a very different nature. The impression reading Ethan Frome is that Zina's evil and her scheming and her cunning are not really even her fault. She feels almost like some sort of insect, like some sort of automaton, whose cruelty is just beyond their control. It's just the way she is. In that sense, Zina is a wonderful portrayal of the way pain can truly change human behavior and can truly push people to a state of animal, base cruelty. Her jealousy and her spite clearly originate in the limitations that her illness imposes on her, and the fact that this illness appears to be almost potentially entirely psychological doesn't really allow us to just point the finger at her. I can only imagine that spending a couple of winters at Ethan Frome's farm would make me crazy and would make me probably much crueler than Zina. Speaking of which, Wharton is truly great in portraying the way the landscape these people live in, its climate, its dynamic, its nature, the society they live in too, the way all of these factors completely beyond their control influence the course of their life. There is a constant sense of concern and worry in the novel with what the cold could do to these characters, with the fact that New England winter is something that could very easily kill you, and even when it doesn't, makes your life incredibly difficult. There's constant preoccupation with heating up rooms. Life in the farm revolves around the fireplace, and this cruel landscape where economical ruin is always just a step away. Well, it's not that much of a surprise then that it creates these types of cruel lives and cruel characters. And by the way, Wharton creates this wonderful, beautiful, immersive landscape and setting without spending any time giving you the minutiae and details of plows or crop rotations or whatever it is that happens on farms. The economy of words in Ethan Frome is almost magical. with the little information that Wharton gives you, you're able to create such a complete portrait of this town and of the farmlands around it and of the lives of Ethan, his family, and his village. The affection blossoming between Ethan and Mattie is represented in very clear, very delicate terms. Just as a novel has a perfect economy, keeps a perfect economy of words, the same can be said of its sentiments. Really, the greatest representation and the greatest expression of this affection comes when the characters touch the opposite ends of the same piece of knitting. But at the same time, you are able to appreciate the full scope and the full intensity of their feelings, and yet the final twist in the novel, the way the events pan out, makes it impossible to deify, to venerate this affection and this relationship. It strips this narrative of the potential for obsession that is instead there in stories like The Sorrows of Young Werther, those stories I mentioned at the beginning, that sometimes end up serving a narrative that might be in conflict with what their author intended. Overall, Ethan Frome is a masterful feat of storytelling. It's one of those short novels that somehow packed an impossible amount of wonder and pain and suffering and insight into the workings of human beings, of life, in such a short amount of pages. It put me in mind of works like Of Mice and Men of Steinbeck or Slaughterhouse 5 by Kurt Vonnegut in its brevity. Its frame narrative is exploited to perfection. Its final twist is one of the most shocking I've ever encountered and shows how destructive acts, even self-destructive acts, can only possibly lead to more pain and never truly to salvation. My only concern for the novel is because it ticks so many boxes. It's quite short, it captures its landscape very well, it plays with the form of the short novel in a very clear manner. I'm afraid this is the kind of books that's featured in a lot of high school syllabi, and I'm really curious to hear from American people watching the video whether this is a book that's generally read in high school, because I'm worried about this because I wonder whether high school is the right age at which to approach Ethan Frome, or whether some of its points might not fly over the head of many of the students, especially those who are not passionate readers outside the classroom, but what do I know? More broadly speaking, I look forward to discussing the novel in the comment section and to hear more about Edith Wharton, the rest of her oeuvre really. This is my first Wharton novel, but I loved it so much, and I definitely cannot wait to explore more of her works. Thank you as always for watching the video.